And welcome. We are live. And my audio seems to be working better tonight. So, with that said, I will put that down so I can think and speak to you. So, thank you again for joining us this evening. This is Eva Live with myself, Jordan Brandt. I am a hybrid electric vehicle expert with about 9 years experience in the field. Got started doing conversions back in 2011, and yeah, been going since then. And I started my other company, Voltec Hybrid and EV Repair, back in 2017, officially. So yeah, that's a full service, and it looks like my stream is going. So with that said, I will put this out of our way. Please excuse me. This is live, and I don't have any support with me this evening. It's just myself, no camera operator or anything like that. But I can do other cool stuff like the tangent cam, which is this one right here, which hopefully works good. I kind of have to double check my work. Yeah, looks pretty good. All right, cool. Go back to this other one. All right, let's double check my audio one more time. Okay, everything is looking a-okay. All right, so continuing. Yeah, so Voltec Hybrid and EV Repair does full service on all makes and models of hybrid and electric vehicles. We've been doing that, since 2017. Mainly rebuilding battery packs. That's what I got my start with Voltec, was rebuilding battery packs for Toyota hybrids, and then eventually moving to Hondas and GM two-mode hybrids, and just gone on from there. So I started EVA, Electric Vehicles for All, just back on July 11th. And EVA is a nonprofit organization that the main mission of EVA are the following. Main missions of EVA are the following. Number one, the manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles, and any vehicle for that matter, but especially hybrid and electric vehicles, it uses a lot of resources, right? And water, different materials you have to mine, and then all the energy and carbon that's emitted to actually get that to market. So the first thing that we do is we want to reduce that. That's our main goal, is to reduce the amount of waste and emissions associated with building these vehicles. Because if we can do that, then we can reach our emission targets faster. Let's see if I can find my other one here. I have many tabs open. Oh yeah, here we go. That was the thing. Yeah. So if you take a look here, I had a better view on it. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, let's do this too. All right, now you're seeing what I'm looking at. So this is the fact sheet from what is this, World something, big organization. I'm messing it up, but again, we're live. Anyways, U.S. emissions projections to 2012, policy baseline compared with potential reductions from additional measures consistent with the Climate Action Plan. So, what you see on that gray line is historic emissions, where we were in this graph starts at 1990, and it's showing up to present. The time of this report, or when this data went up to, was 2012. And even though this report came out in 2014, you have to understand that data, it had to be collected, and then it had to be analyzed, and that took 2 years, right? So the latest data that they can get was from 2 years previous. So then if you look at the 2012 baseline, and okay, yeah, so that's where they're showing. I guess this graph gets a little bit more confusing than I was hoping it would, but as far as explaining it, because it makes sense to me in my head, but I need to explain this to you. So, long story short, where we're trying to get is we're trying to bring these levels back down, and that's where they draw 2012 baseline, policy baseline. So that was from a policy they made in 2012. They also drew that dotted blue line to show you if you just continued from 2005 emissions, right? If you just stayed at 2005 emissions, which is actually almost the highest year. It looks like about 2000 was the highest year. So I don't know why they chose 2005. Probably had something to do with when they made some agreements. And then they're showing, yes, these additional measures, how they could get this number to go down, because as you see, the trend has been progressing down. And then what they're showing is, to get down below 17% reduction below 2005 levels. That's the purple dotted line, and 26% reduction below 2005. So what they're showing you there, I'll go back to this because I know that stuff is boring, and I'm trying to have this not be boring, but we'll see how I do. So to get to those projections, right? To bring it down below 2005 levels, and the reason why they've selected 2005 levels is, well, that has to do with what levels climate scientists say we can accept, basically, without causing these irreversible tipping points to happen. So that's why there's those years, and they selected though that. I answered my own question, I guess. Why did they select 2005? I guess that's why. If I read the whole report, then I would know. But it's back to what I was saying though about what EVA does. All right, so a big part of the assumptions that they're making in here, or how they're saying we can get to these reductions, is by having electric vehicles, sustainable transportation, renewable energy, all these different things, right? So if we had a way to make those things happen faster, and then to require less energy and less resources to make those things, that would mean that we could increase the rate that they're getting to these percentages, or we could get there faster, or get there with less resources. So that's the number one main priority of EVA, is to help all these people, scientists and researchers and engineers, and the automakers and governments, policymakers, everybody that's involved, the builders, the inventors, the repair shops, and the community, the people themselves. That's all necessary to make this happen. And the thing is even with these numbers, right, getting to like their 28% below 2005 levels, there's still a lot of problems that we can have. And those tipping points I mentioned, they say we have less than 10 years at this point to really get this under control before we hit those tipping points. And what happens then, as the name implies, once this happens, it's like falling off of a cliff, you know? It's actually pretty easy to fall off of a cliff. Now, I wouldn't recommend it, but much harder to climb back up, right? So, not impossible, but Well, probably impossible if you just fell off of it. Then yeah, probably impossible. Uh, but the point is we really have to do some drastic actions now to reduce carbon emissions today and near term as much as possible. That is of the utmost importance here, is the time factor. Talking about climate science, and you see there's so many different variables involved with it that to normal people it seems misleading when scientists try to explain these things. And in order to simplify things, you kind of have to make these statements that are like, well, they're not untrue, but they're like, it's such a complicated subject, as you can see from this graph, and this is a uncomplicated graph in this realm. So it can seem misleading, but it's not. It's just they have to try to make something so simple that anybody can understand it. You kind of have to simplify and trim some of the edges, if you will, in order to give the data in a way that somebody could look at it and actually understand it. And you can look at all of these, and I do, and I mean, really the message is, the takeaway, in my opinion, the main takeaway is we have to drastically reduce emissions within the next 10 years. And on top of that, even if we just somehow turned off all carbon emissions tonight, we're still going to see enormous effects from what's already underway, the process that's already been underway for over 100 years now, and processes that have been underway for thousands and tens of thousands of years. Because that's where this stuff gets even more complicated, is that, well, climate science, it's not all just man-made, obviously. What we're talking about when we're talking about climate science is that man's effect on the climate. And I think for a lot of people, it's hard to imagine that us being so small and the world so large, that we could actually have an effect on the atmosphere, especially, right? I mean, it's huge. You look up at the sky and, you see jets way up there, and it just doesn't seem possible. But you have to factor in time. It's been over 100 years that we've been burning this. And so the amount that we've released in that 100 years. So when they say it's a fossil fuel, it's about, depending on the region, 70 to 90% algae, seawater algae that oil came from. So it's literally, there's a good book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight by Tom Hartman, and he taught, and this is where I learned some of this from, but it's interesting to think about it this way, because it's actually literal as well. Oil, petroleum, is actually ancient sunlight. So it was created by these, most of it by seawater algae, and that were just floating in the ocean, and they're grabbing CO2 from the water, and 30% of the CO2 that gets released into the atmosphere, it gets absorbed by the oceans. So the oceans work as a buffer, which is another complicating factor in all of this. And that in and of itself is a even more troubling issue, that is ocean acidification, which just that issue alone, I know, let's try this. Tangent cam. So if you're talking to somebody about climate science and they're skeptical, What I bring up, and I tend to always bring up because this is important, is ocean acidification. The science there is very straightforward. It's not up in the air by any means. Not that the climate science in general is up in the air either, but when it comes to ocean acidification, it's just clear. It's chemistry. It's basic chemistry and biology, and so 30% of the CO2 that gets released, whether by humans or natural sources, will be absorbed into the oceans. Now, carbon dioxide, when it goes into water, H2O, it changes into carbonic acid, which is an acid. And the oceans are supposed to be alkaline, slightly alkaline. So on a pH, they should be, I believe it's about what, between 7.4, 7.8, I want to say. So, it's very similar to human blood. And actually, the salinity is similar to blood as well, which is interesting, right? And there's other things too. But then again, well, I won't go into that topic. But on the tangent of ocean acidification, I'm already in a tangent. I needed another camera to go into a tangent camera. So that's getting into like that movie about dreams. But ocean acidification, so that is straightforward. That science, all right. The oceans are supposed to be slightly alkaline. So when you add a acid to it, you are changing that pH. Now, if you just added more water to it, that would be diluting it. So, which does actually change the pH, but and that's another factor that's going on. There is actually glaciers that are melting, right? But that's not really the largest reason for sea level rise. That's raising temperatures. But tangent camera. Ocean acidification, though, it's just basic chemistry. That when that CO2 goes into water, it changes to carbonic acid, and it's changing the pH of the oceans. Now, you may say, well, why is that important? Well, it's the same reason why the pH of your blood is very important. And if it was just a small degree off, you would be very sick and no longer alive. So just because something's small does not mean that it doesn't matter. And especially when talking about climate, I'll save that for the next tangent. But ocean acidification is literally, it's killing the oceans, and that is just one of multiple stressors that is killing the oceans right now. So you have, the increased temperatures, coral bleaching. There's a coral bleaching event going on, I believe, right now in Hawaii. So I'll have to ask some of my friends and family there at how bad it was. I know they were predicting and forecasting that this was going to be another bad one. They had one a few years back, I think in 2011, I want to say, but and it's happening more regularly, and it's very sad. If you've been to the oceans and you've seen those reefs and you know their beauty, to think that they're going to no longer exist. Yeah, I said that. They will no longer exist. These are according to analysis and reports that I've read from the World Health Organization, and I can't remember the other one right now, but basically they're saying if we continue at our current pace, and so like in this graph, from like that 2005 projection, if we continued up without making these reductions that they're talking about. That's what they're saying. Like if we didn't follow these greenhouse gas protocols, it's back to this camera, that it would, that we'd have to get to these targets. And so I'm forgetting my thought, but I need a co-host. So yeah, that's with ocean acidification though. If somebody's skeptical about climate change. Just say, hey, it doesn't, okay, let's just put that to the side, whether or not man has a influence on the atmosphere, okay? Ocean acidification is provable, and it's not disputable because it's so straightforward. And if you want your children and your grandchildren to be able to see dolphins actually like in the wild, coral reefs, if you enjoy eating seafood, which about 30% of the planet humans depend on, 30% of their protein comes from the sea for humans. So yeah, if those things are important to you, then just on that alone, ocean acidification alone, you should care about cutting your carbon emissions. Because what those reports I was speaking about, what they say is that if we were to continue not following these protocols, doing business as usual, not making drastic changes, that by 2050 there would be no more commercial fishing at all. Now, you could still catch fish in some areas, but what they're saying is that the commercial fishing industry as a whole would no longer exist. As I mentioned, multiple stressors. You have, increased heat with coral bleaching. You have pollution, like just literally chemicals in the water, mercury, radioactive isotopes from Fukushima Daiichi. And then you have increased UV exposure because we've destroyed with chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, we've destroyed parts of the ozone layer. And then you have overfishing that's going on. You have all this habitat destruction, trawling, oil spills, etc. And on top of all of that, you have ocean acidification, which will literally make life in the oceans impossible for the species we know now. So that those reports go on to say that by 2100, if we had continued business as usual, that by that point there would be no fish in the ocean. They would be the only living thing in the oceans then would be this purple bacteria. Yeah, so that would obviously not be very cool. It'd be cool to look at maybe once or twice, but oh, cool, the oceans are purple. And then once you realize there's nothing alive except for purple bacteria, that's enough for me to take climate seriously. So, how does all that relate to EVA? Well, EVA, we will reduce the emissions that it takes to make the technology to reduce emissions, which seems like a tangent inside of a tangent, but it takes carbon to build solar panels. It takes carbon and resources to build electric vehicles. So what we do in the next 10 years is very important. How we use our resources is very important. So we can't just do what we think is the best solution or what seems to be the most marketable or what's the most profitable. Really, we need to be thinking, the way we need to be thinking is, how do we reduce these emissions the most? And while taking into mind some other important things, like, how do we do that, reduce emissions, while also ensuring that we don't, take away so many jobs that we create a massive problem. All right, so displacing workers, we need plans to retrain those workers and make sure that they get back in the workforce. And so yeah, making sure that it's done fairly, right? There's benefits and there's costs to any technology. So renewable energy and sustainable transportation is no exception. So there is environmental impacts to mining lithium to make batteries. Now, we can control those. That is controllable, and we can improve that with better technology and better practices. But if we just want things really cheaply, or very cheap, then perhaps suppliers getting those materials, they're not as inclined to care about the mess they may leave behind. And now that's gotten a lot better in places like China. They've improved those practices because some of it was just becoming too obvious with how bad of a job the destruction some of those mines were doing. And that's just because it's not because mining lithium is unsustainable or inherently destructive. Well, in some ways it is, I guess, depending on how you look at it. You are literally pulling the ground apart, but you can put it back together. That's the whole thing. You don't have to have toxic waste products that you leave behind or that you're running into a river. That it doesn't have to be done that way. The reason why you'll see articles or videos slamming against electric vehicles or things, showing those things like, oh look, they're such hypocrites because they're talking about being clean, but then there's this some particular, who knows, little mine somewhere in China that's like just dumping their sediment directly into a stream. And now I know that's been cleaned up significantly. I can't say specifically where all of that stands, but there's always going to be an impact. But we're doing it for a reason, and it's a good reason, because that maybe there is some environmental impact there that they're doing the mining, and there is an environmental impact from doing the refining and the manufacturing of the vehicle and transporting it to market, but it has a payback. So everything I just said up to that point, so everything it takes to get a vehicle to the dealership parking lot where they hand the keys to the person that just bought it, okay? That's its carbon, its manufacturing footprint. Now, they also tie that in with what's called the lifetime carbon footprint of a vehicle. And that takes into account other factors like its fuel economy and the service and repairs, and just things like that. And so obviously there's a lot of assumptions made with that, and I believe most of them are projecting about 160,000 miles. I think it's 15 years, 160,000 miles is what they use as that's the life of a typical vehicle. And they're just setting that based off of averages from the data. So again, tangent cam, I'm going off on tangents. It's live. What else can I say? I'm going to make mistakes. But so what Eve is doing, though, we reduce the amount, the carbon footprint. Oh, okay, I remember. I was saying everything it took to get to the dealership, and I was talking about the lifetime carbon footprint of a vehicle. So the better fuel economy it gets, or if it uses no petroleum fuel at all, then obviously its lifetime emissions will be less. And when you look at that compared to a conventional vehicle, factoring in all of that, because it takes a lot of resources to build a regular car, just like any vehicle. So when you look at all of that, the electric vehicles and the hybrid vehicles, there's a significant savings, a significant reduction compared to just a traditional internal combustion engine vehicle. So that price, that debt that was there to create these things, it gets repaid, and then it gets paid over many times over. And what Eva's saying is, let's pay it over as many times as possible or as practical, right? So if it can pay over 10 times or 15 times, well, let's take it to 20 times or 30 times, right? I mean, the more we increase that number, it's we're multiplying the effect. So that's brings us to number 2 of what EVA does, and that is refurbishing and repairing and getting back on the road hybrid and electric vehicles that are sorry, let me turn that off. That are no, let's just say like Toyota Priuses like this that are older. They're maybe high mileage. There's the body's in great shape, like these ones right here are like over 200,000, both of them. And I drive the blue one, and yeah, so both of those, when I got them, though, they had an issue. They needed a new hybrid battery or, something else, ABS brake pump assembly, for example. So if I didn't fix them, these vehicles, they'll bounce through to some different auctions. Somebody may buy it and try to fix it, maybe not. And the lowest bidder on these auctions for these types of vehicles are the junkyards and the recyclers. I mean, that's if nobody else will take them, then that's who bids on them. That's the lowest bids, and they're just buying it for parts. And that's what Voltec has been doing for years is going to junkyards and getting those parts and cleaning them up, testing it, getting the batteries and reusing the batteries to rebuild other batteries and et cetera, to keep vehicles like this on the road. And so when we do that, though, that carbon lifetime emissions I was talking about, these vehicles, their manufacturing footprint, it's already been paid off, right? If it's at 200,000 miles, well, it's already paid that debt off. So now everything past that is this net savings, and so that's why that's important. That basically, if we want to get more hybrid and electric vehicles on the road, the best way to do that is to keep the number. Best way to get more hybrid and electric vehicles on the road is to keep the ones we already have on the road for longer. And how we do that is by properly servicing and repairing them, and having ways and methods to ensure that that's done, and that it's affordable. And that's really the key word, is being affordable, because it doesn't matter how great of a electric vehicle you have if it's not affordable and you can't really produce massive numbers of it. Now, it may be impressive to do a couple 100,000 a year, because that is, but it's nowhere close to enough of what we really need to reduce emissions. And again, vehicles in transportation is just part of the whole emissions, carbon emissions. So, but it's important, right? There's not one single thing we can do that's going to reduce our carbon footprints. It's multiple things. But for a lot of Americans, if you drive a vehicle, then that is a good place to start, because that is a carbon intensive activity. So, and yeah, there's two ways to bring down carbon in the atmosphere. And that is to literally pull it from the air. So planting trees and letting them grow. It takes, if you take a seedling and put it in the ground and it grows to be a full tree, it will sequester about 1 ton of CO2, 2,000 pounds. So 40 years. And if I showed you a graph of that, of what it looked like for how much CO2 it was absorbing over time, it's not a linear line, like you just start here and it's just a straight line up to 1 ton. No, it does a more curved growth like that, where when it's a seedling, of course, it's small. So for the first few years, it's really not doing any significant amount of carbon removal. It really starts producing a lot in the last half of its life. Now, of course, that depends on the tree, the climate, a lot of different factors. That's an average number that I gave you, and that's a lot of these numbers that you'll see that I'll be presenting and talking about. They're averages that are based off of large data sets, and so you could see very different results with a different species and different climate. So, but if you took all of that together and took the average of it, then that's what it is, 1 ton in 40 years, but really not significantly till the last half of its life, which basically means that there really isn't enough trees we could plant that will prevent these tipping points that I was talking about. So now, I'm not saying we shouldn't plant trees. It's a good idea. It's a good thing to do. I'm just saying that alone is not going to prevent a climate crisis. And in many ways, you could argue we are already seeing a climate crisis. And I would say, yes, indeed we are. So, all right. So, yeah. So, Eva, by just keeping these vehicles on the road for longer, we can get more people driving hybrid and electric vehicles. And which brings us to number 3, and that is that the people that would benefit the most from driving a hybrid or electric vehicle are the people that cannot afford to own them. So 80% of battery electric vehicles, BEVs, are leased, not bought. And this is for North America, I'm speaking. So 80% of new battery electric vehicles are leased, not bought. And there's articles I've read where they talk about that as a good thing, right? Because electric vehicles depreciate very quickly. Right now, an electric vehicle follows a depreciation curve that is more similar to a flat screen TV than it is to a traditional automobile. And that percentage is 72.7% in the first 3 years. So, yes, if you buy a BEV, a battery electric vehicle, in 2020, and you bought it for let's just say $100,000, right? By 2023, that would be, what's that, 27, 26 and a half, something like that, right? I mean, it's in 3 years later, it has lost almost 3/4 of its value. Now, I know there's a lot of people that are going to say, no, that's not true. And that's not true for certain vehicles. Again, these are averages, right? So that's based on averages for the total number of electric vehicles and hybrids. So there are definitely exceptions to that case, but generally it's true, and it's true because it's a technology that's changing so rapidly that it quickly makes itself obsolete, right? It's just like planned obsolescence, but it's unplanned obsolescence faster. That's what it is. I mean, let's think about it this way. You get the best smartphone, whatever the new iPhone or whatever that comes out for 2020, right? So, or whatever the best phone is for 2020. And by 2023, what is that phone? Well, it's no longer the best smartphone. It's 2 years behind the best smartphone, right? And in our consumerist, materialist culture, that's unacceptable. You must have the latest and greatest. So, what that means is that, people, if we want to increase the numbers of these on the road, that it's hard to buy something, or it's hard to justify buying something like that new vehicle if it was $100,000. If you knew it's going to lose 2/3 maybe, or up to almost 3/4 of its value in the first 3 years. Now, it's worth noting for a regular vehicle in that same study, I think like conventional ICE with about the same in the same price range and stuff, it was more around like 60% or something. So it's still pretty significant even for a regular vehicle. So to give some perspective on that, it's not too crazy, but it is a big factor, right? And so that means as a consumer, it would be unwise to purchase a battery electric vehicle out of pocket, fully. You'd be much better off leasing it and or waiting a few years to buy one that's already been leased, or buy one that somebody bought and didn't like or something. So that's what some of these articles say, is that, well, this is a good thing, right? Because electric vehicles are expensive, so a lot of people wouldn't be able to afford buying one. So leasing and it gives people peace of mind about the service and reliability issues, right? So, and that's another thing you'll hear talked about a lot is, well, electric vehicles require much less service and maintenance, which is true. But then you'll hear people say they don't break. Well, they do. They do, and especially, you have to understand, these are new vehicles. Depending on what manufacturer they came from, they may have been in testing anywhere from just a few years to maybe 8 to 10 years, depending on what company and how strict they are with testing something thoroughly before they release it. So you may be driving a beta, whatever it is. You may be driving a beta. Am I just confusing with that dude? Anyways, beta fish. You may be driving a prototype by some vehicles manufacturer's standards. So, and so since it's so new, there's a lot of changes that are happening quickly, which means that the best one you get this year, it's not going to be that great a few years from now. And if you're the person that has to have the latest and greatest, well, that means you'll just be switching. So leasing a vehicle, though, leasing a battery electric vehicle. Well, who can do that, right? What does it take to lease a vehicle? Obviously a driver's license and good credit or excellent credit, proof of employment or income, and a cosigner if you don't have really good credit, and maybe a down payment, maybe not, and then full coverage insurance. And the more expensive a vehicle is, the more expensive full coverage insurance is on it. So if you live in a state like I do in Michigan, where we have literally the highest auto insurance rates in the country, that fact alone, the requirement of full coverage insurance, that may make it impossible or just not viable, not financially viable for you to get that vehicle. Whatever savings you might save from fuel, it's going to be spent on this increased insurance. Now, that's not true for everybody, but basically, so after 3 years, though, let's say after the lease is up, and in this case, if it was just 3 years, well, and this vehicle's lost, 2/3 of its value or something, well, that sounds like an opportunity then for used car buyers, right? To buy. I mean, you're saying that an electric vehicle that cost $100,000 just 3 years ago, I can get for $27,000 or $26,500, whatever it is. That sounds amazing, right? Yeah, it is. But there's another side to that, and there's a few parts to that, and that is servicing and maintaining the vehicle. So when I said electric vehicles don't break, well, they do, and that's what I was talking about. They're new, right? So there's going to be just certain kind of glitches and things that may not be caught. Maybe they're not like a real safety imperative issue, but just things like the Bluetooth audio not connecting, or maybe your speedometer not displaying the fuel level or something, or charge level. Seemingly little things that can make a vehicle undrivable. I mean, if you can't see your speedometer at all, you can open up a navigation program on your phone and look at your speed that way. I know because I've done that. But yeah, I mean, just something small like that can make somebody say, you know what, I'm done with this car. And where it goes after that owner, that's a whole nother discussion. It bounces through different places, but eventually, all of these vehicles eventually end up at a junkyard. And so when I said, yeah, electric vehicles don't break, well, they do break. And then also there's this thing called accidents. Two vehicles hit each other, or anything else, floods, fires. So when that happens, to like Gen 2 Toyota Prius, for example, maybe it gets hit in the front pretty bad, right? Like to the point where that you can't put that car back on the road, or it just wouldn't be practical, or wouldn't be safe. Well, the battery in there, there's still a lot of other good components, maybe the tires off the back, all of that stuff that you could take from that vehicle and then put it on another one of them, right, that needs new tires, or it needs a new battery. You've in essence the sacrifice of one Prius. It's like an organ donor, actually. One organ donor can save, who knows, maybe 100 people's lives if you really, which they do utilize as much as possible, obviously. But yeah, one organ donor could really save a lot of people's lives, or have an impact on a lot of people's lives. So one Prius donor can save the lives of many other Priuses that weren't taken out as badly. Maybe the other one just needed a new rear hatch. Maybe it did get bumped in the back. It just needs a new fender on the back. And why that's important is because if we want to reduce emission levels like this, it requires us making these technologies that are cleaner. And there's two ways to reduce carbon in the atmosphere: pull it out of the air using plants or machines, or make processes and technologies that already release carbon into the atmosphere. If you could make those more efficient so that they release less carbon into the atmosphere, the net result between doing those two things is basically the same, and that is less carbon in the atmosphere and in the oceans. Being given $1 is the same as saving $1 from your wallet's perspective. So the issue that we have, and I think I did have some other graphs, but I'm not going to pull it up right now. I'll lose track of my thought, about increasing, like they show the correspondence between decreasing emissions like this and increasing the number of hybrid and electric vehicles on the road, like actually quantifying the reduction in carbon that's being released, right? There's still carbon being released, but less than before, or less than would have been released otherwise without this technology. And then they show, how these reductions took place for the overall reductions, right? So as you increase the number of hybrid and electric vehicles, the emissions, total greenhouse gas emissions, goes down in combination with other things. But they can actually quantify how much of an effect just these vehicles have. So if we want to get the percentage of hybrid and electric vehicles up, there's a few things to keep in mind there. To get the percentage up, well, first of all, it's a moving target. So 10% of hybrid, or just 10% of the total number of vehicles on the roads today in America in 2019, or let's just say 2020, that's a lot less than the 10% that will be on the roads by the year 2030. There's going to be many more cars on the roads by 2030, which means that 10% of all the vehicles on the roads now, what is it? It's a couple 100 million if we're talking about light duty passenger vehicles. But, anyways, yeah, you get the picture, right? So it's a moving target. So if you want to, that means just to maintain, like right now we're at about 3.5% hybrid and electric vehicles. So just to maintain that, it might be 4% at this point. But, yeah, just to maintain that percentage, 3.5%, would require producing more and more hybrid and electric vehicles every year because there is more vehicles on the road. And if you want to increase the percentage, you would have to, because that's not just increasing the number on the road, to increase the percentage that's relative to the other ones on the road. So that means that not only do you have this moving target, but on top of that, you're moving the moving target, I guess. It's a moving target. It's like acceleration. So, which means that you have to just keep making more and more and more just to keep up. And then there's a third part, and that is the loss rate. And how many do you lose per year from accidents? Accidents, floods, right? So, let's see, I can do this. There we go. I think you can kind of see that, maybe. I can also switch to this. No, that's really not the best. This is for Priuses. Yeah, I probably shouldn't really show that. Never mind. Back to me. Yeah. So if we're get back to where I was before I started trying to pull up graphs, but what I was trying to show was just yes, the loss. Sorry, that's what it was, the loss rate. And I do have that one, and I can pull it up eventually. I'll have to do it during when I play a video or something for a few minutes. But yeah, the loss rate. So we're losing a certain number of vehicles, all vehicles, hybrid or not electric, regular, all of them, from accidents and other reasons. So there's a certain percentage that get taken off the road every year from that. Now, there's another reason too, not just being totaled in an accident, but it's what's called financially totaled. And that's when the car actually is still fine. It wasn't in an accident necessarily, but it just needs some mechanical repairs, let's say. Like, so again, back to a 2004 to 2009 Prius. It's got 225,000 miles on it. So you could still get it, $3,000 for one that's got that kind of mileage, believe it or not, because they last a long time and they're very, very reliable. And so, yeah, it's only worth, though, let's say about $3,000. Well, if it needs a new hybrid battery and you're the owner of that vehicle, and you go to the dealership and they say, yeah, it's $3,800 to put a new battery in that, and you say, man, dang, that's it, that's all we can do. Yeah, sorry, that's all we can do.
That's the price. Maybe you shop around a little bit. And if you did shop around, you might start finding battery rebuilding companies, right? And they may tell you how great a rebuilt battery is and how much money you're going to save, and it's going to last forever and all this stuff, which it won't. But, and I'm a battery rebuilding company, so, but yeah, why would somebody spend $3,800 to fix a car that's only worth $3,000? That doesn't make sense, right? I mean, because it doesn't make sense. I wouldn't do that, would you? But you see, you're talking about the market value of that vehicle in dollars in our capitalist system, right? So that's the system that we're in, and it's a measurement of something in our system, in this case, dollars, and how much it's worth in dollars in our system. But there's other types of value. So you have carbon reduction value, or pollution reduction value, and that's where the idea of carbon credits, carbon offset credits come in. But then there's also utilitarian value. So how much value does this product or technology or service, how much value does it bring to the community, to the people, and the environment? So those are just two other types of values. You could measure other things as well. You can get real specific with it. How much water, saving water value, whatever you want to call that, water preservation value. So there's other values to look at, not just how much is it worth to sell it on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace now. And so, yes, there's other values. And it's important to look at those other values because, see, in this example, people are going to say, no, I'm not going to put that much money into that car. It's not worth that much. Even though they love it, they love the car, and they really would like to keep it. Now, if they find Voltec, then they can keep the car because we have different options. We'll either rebuild their battery, give them a different rebuilt battery, a used battery with lower mileage on it, or a new battery at significantly less cost than the dealership, a new OEM battery, that is. So we give people options, and we work with people, and so we're able to keep that car on the road, even if it's just for another year, so that they could save up a little bit more money to get something decent. So it's not. Yeah, you really got to look at these other measures. And if I said, well, okay, let's put that new battery in for $3,800 into a car that's worth $3,000. Well, pretty stupid, right? Well, no, because doing that compared to if you took that car off the road. So if that person sold the car, goes to an auction, it goes to a dealership, but then people realize, you know what, we don't, switch back to this camera, we don't want this vehicle. We can't make money on this, and it goes then to the junkyards and the recyclers, and where it's dismantled, and just the most valuable parts are taken from it, like the battery, maybe the engine and transmission, and a few other things. And so that year, so then that's one less hybrid and electric vehicle that's on the road for that year, right? If they said, you know what, done with this car, and it didn't work out as good as I thought it did. I bought this high mileage Prius, and I only had it for a year, and then the hybrid battery went. And that's a lot of people that come to me, that come to Voltec, have found that out the hard way. Right? Here's somebody trying to do the right thing. Hey, maybe I could save a little bit of money and be a little bit nicer to the environment at the same time. They're not ready for a full electric yet, and they don't have enough money, even if they were. And if they did, like I said, because of the leasing, it's just to a lot of my customers, they are not eligible. I don't think I'm even eligible to lease a new electric vehicle. I don't know, maybe at this point, but probably. But I get them, from the junkyard and stuff. So I don't like buying things new anyways. I'd rather just wait a few years and get it way cheaper. So that's always been my philosophy on that. But back to what I was saying. If you want to increase the percentage of hybrid and electric vehicles on the road, you have, like I said, a moving target, and you have a moving target, and then you have you're losing a certain number per year, which means that for every one that you make, there's whatever new ones you're adding, replaces that one that you lost. So if you're trying to get that number to go up, it's those three factors I just mentioned are working against you to keep that number down, keep that percentage down, and to force it to go slowly. And so we can increase the rate that percentage goes up if we simply reduce the loss rate. If we reduced that loss rate, or bringing it under control where they stay on the road longer. It's pretty simple. If another year it's on the road, again, it's a high mileage Prius like this, it's already paid its carbon debt. If all it needs to keep it on the road is to use some used component that we got from another vehicle, then then that's perfect, right? Go back to this, make sure. All right. So, yeah, it takes very little emissions. You could almost say then, in the example with one of these, if it just needed the hybrid battery to be rebuilt, right? It's already repaid its carbon debt many, many times over. And all we got to do now, I just got to go in there and find which battery module's weak and replace that one or a few of them, and cycle the pack to recondition it and balance it and do more testing on it and get it back to the point where it's back within spec. It's not a new battery. Important to point out, not a new battery. It's a rebuilt battery. So, but if you do that, right, I mean, that took very little resources. That was mostly labor for me or one of my technicians to do that. And, well, as it turns out, mechanics can be kind of expensive. And also, as it turns out, the dealerships happen to be the most expensive. And it also turns out that specialized mechanics, like, diesel mechanics and hybrid and electric vehicle mechanics, tend to be more expensive, right? So you might have a Prius like this with 225,000 miles on it that is great, and you've had it for the last 5 years, and you put 80,000 miles on it, and it needs a new ABS pump, okay, which you can get from the junkyard for $250 up to maybe $500. But it costs like $1,200 in labor for if you even found a shop that is willing to do it. They might hit you with a number like that. And if you walked into a dealership, well, they don't use parts from the junkyard. They use new parts. And you would be... I literally had, a customer not too long ago that had been to the dealership, and they had sitting on the passenger seat an invoice or a quote from the dealership. It was a Gen 2 Prius, like one of these, and it wasn't even that high a mileage either. It was only at, like, I think 150, which for a Prius is not high, and 150,000. And that invoice, that estimate, was to replace the ABS pump accumulator assembly and the hybrid battery. Okay, it was $5,800, and that wasn't including labor. Yeah, yeah. Which means with labor, it was probably, gosh, $8,000 or something insane. Obviously nobody's gonna do that, right? Doesn't make sense. But I'm telling you, wait a second, you can get that same part from the junkyard, and it's got a little use on it, but we clean it up, test it for $250 to $500. But then you do got to pay somebody. You need a shop that knows how to do that. Well, that's what Voltec does, right? And so there was that invoice there for $5,800 in parts. Okay. And I have the invoice, and I could prove this if somebody wants to challenge me on this. It was $1,300, $1,328, right? That is literally less than a fifth of the price of the dealership. Needless to say, they were very happy. This person is a college student, and they rely on this vehicle, and saving them money on fuel is obviously important to any college student. Well, I guess not any, most. If you're a community college student like I was, it's definitely important. And then so yeah, that's just an example right there, right? Where if that person didn't find me, actually, if his mother didn't get on the internet and find me on Facebook and find me, college kid, his mom got on Facebook and found Voltec. That's funny, right? Yeah, if they hadn't found me, they most likely would have just traded it in right there at that dealership and been given some nominal amount for it and applied towards a trade-in, or tried to sell it on their own. Maybe they would have found Voltec then, which a lot of times that is how they find me. And then they realize, oh, wait a second, you're telling me that you could do it for what price, and that I don't have to get rid of it now? And yeah, they're very happy to hear that. And I realized this went way far beyond just happy customers and people saving some money on fuel. Actually, when you look at this stuff on a mass scale, which it is, by the end of this year, so by 2020, Toyota is on track to have sold 15 million hybrids worldwide since they started selling them in 2001, 97, but 2001. So yeah, there's a lot of them. And while they may not be as cool as a Tesla, the impact on emissions is significant. And when you factor in time is a critical factor. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you want to build a Tesla today, you have to release a lot of carbon to do that, right? And then you have to charge that with solar or wind or hydro, 100% renewable for a certain number of years, depending on the model and how many kilowatt hours the battery is. I was reading a report recently. I want to say for I think it was for I can't remember if it was for the 85 kilowatt or the 100 kilowatt. It might have been for the 100 kilowatt. They were saying 3 years charging on solar, 100% solar, before it will have paid back its manufacturing carbon footprint. And so that's 3 years. And then if you weren't using 100% renewable sources, it would be longer than that. So the importance of that is that, okay, I said we have less than 10 years to really cut emissions levels. So if you do something that's releasing a lot of emissions now, and it doesn't even start having a net negative effect until a few years from now, now case-by-case basis, Okay, there's exceptions to that. But then why does it make sense to do that? Is that the best thing to do? And that's what I'm asking with this video is, are hybrids a better option than electric vehicles, than battery electric vehicles? Got to drink some water. Yeah, and my argument is that they are, in fact, better now because of the timelines I'm talking about. And here's the thing. If we do what I'm talking about and we just take care of all these hybrids and electric vehicles that we already have, and we keep them on the road longer, that means we don't have to build as many new ones. So here's my analogy, okay? You got a boat, you're in a boat, and it's taking on water, and it's got a bunch of water in it already, right? It's a bunch of water in it, and you're bailing it out as fast as you can, right? And you're saying to people, man, I really got to get this water out of here. Can you help me? I need a bigger bucket, and I need to go faster. I need more of you in here to help me bail this out. So more buckets, bigger buckets, and do it faster, right? So build more electric vehicles, longer range electric vehicles, and more charging stations, right? But then somebody comes along and says, hey man, why don't you plug the holes in the bottom of your boat? There's like a bunch of holes in the bottom of your boat. So maybe, if you just plugged them, you wouldn't have to bail as much water or as quickly. You wouldn't need a bigger bucket then, right? You could use the same size bucket you were using, maybe even a smaller bucket. And you could slow down a little, right? And you could actually get the water out of the boat then, right? And so that's exactly what's going on right now. So we're losing a lot of these vehicles, not just because of accidents or fires or floods, but because of certain mechanical failures, or even just an accident where the vehicle's not ruined, but if you hit a Chevy Volt or something in the front, or a lot of these electrics, you got some expensive components right up in the front now. Your chargers, different things. A fender bender nowadays, and now with like LiDAR and all these new sensors and stuff, man, fender benders could turn into like an $8,000 repair bill. See, who was it? It wasn't Rich Rebuilds. It was some of these other guys and their experience with a Model 3, I believe, and the one guy backed up, reversing into their garage and just accidentally hit this one little thing. It was hard to see, right? And it I think it bent the panel or something on the back there. Anyways, it turned into this months long process to get the thing fixed, and they had to take. This was the Model 3 with the glass on the roof, the glass ceiling, and so it actually required removing that as well. And sometimes when you try to remove that part, you break it, which I can attest to removing windshields and accidentally breaking them. Yes, it happens. So they accidentally broke it, so it took longer. And these guys, they love Tesla. They love that car. And they were like, man, this isn't very good. And granted, now Tesla has a lot of good articles written about their service model, and I will give them props for certain parts on that, and that is because their mobile service, which is what Voltec has been doing for years, it makes sense. So I understand that, and I know that customers appreciate that service when it makes sense. You can't do everything mobile, or it's not practical. And that's why then they have, instead of having, a bunch of dealerships and repair shops around a state, they just have like one or two main service centers. And then they got mobile technicians that could go take care of the easy stuff, which hopefully is the bulk of it. Or at least that's the idea, that's the theory. And it's true. I mean, I can go do battery swaps on Priuses and different hybrid vehicles all day long. I can do that mobile. I don't have to do that in the shop. And sometimes that makes a lot of sense if people don't have money to get it towed to the shop and all of that. So to fix the vehicle where it sits, so to speak, and so people like that service, and so Tesla does good on that. But then. And so this isn't like Tesla's fault necessarily on this other video. What I'm saying is that when you have vehicles that have, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of components in them, a fender bender can turn into quite an expensive affair, especially if you don't have a shop that can work on it. If your only option is the dealership, if you have like the new Jaguar I-Pace, for example. I mean, your options are going to be limited on who can work on that. Now, granted, it's not as limited as working on a Tesla, because me as an independent repair shop, if I want to pay to get the subscription to get the diagnostic software for a Jaguar, I can do that. And pay to get the service information, I can do that. That's it's called the Right to Repair Act. And Tesla is the only manufacturer to not be in compliance with that. But I'll save that topic for other videos. And let me be clear about one thing. I fully support Tesla. They are an American electric car company, and they make a great product when it's working, and that you could say that about any car, right? I mean, and I don't mean that totally tongue in cheek, because it's true. Like, even with some, fancy cars. I mean, the Jaguar I-Pace, for example, there's some issues, right? You'd be surprised that even a luxury vehicle could have, like I said, such a simple issue could make a vehicle not drivable. Something real simple. I can't tell you what, but there's things that can do that, and again, because it's a new technology, right? New model. There's bugs to work out of the system. I was talking about Tesla, and that, yes, I fully support them, and I want them to succeed. And I get frustrated because they do things that it's shooting themselves in the foot. So this whole, it's not really a battle at this point yet, but Tesla not working with independent repair shops. And look, I understand there's some real grievances they had as far as with the OEMs, the other OEMs, and things with oil companies. Yes, some of that stuff is definitely real, and it's definitely happening. What's frustrating to people like me, though, is that we've been in this industry, some of us, since before Tesla automobiles, car company, existed, right? Building and modifying and converting electric vehicles back before you could just go buy a Tesla. And so, so the people that were at the very beginning of this revolution, right? You would think that they had earned a seat at the table. It would be taken seriously, but we're not. We're excluded because, well, Tesla says, hey, first of all, our service is so great, you don't need independent repair shops, which maybe that's true, which it's not. But if it was true, well, what about once it's out of warranty, right? I mean, what happens then? And that would also be true if they were meeting all their service goals quickly. Now, they have a great record as far as taking care of issues and covering things that are covered under warranty, things that are supposed to be covered under warranty, but it can take a long time. They're backlogged in some states, many months to get something simple like somebody knocked off your mirror, your driver's side mirror, right? It could take a few months to get your vehicle back. Now they'll give you a loaner vehicle in the meantime, or you just have to drive with no mirror. Now, I don't take any joy in saying that, like, oh yeah, look at Tesla and how bad they're doing. No, I would really prefer that they were doing better, and I could help them do better, and we could help them do better. We have stuff to offer. We being people that from the hybrid and electric vehicle industry, doing repairs, engineering, research development, prototyping, rapid prototyping, benchmarking, right? There are good people in the automotive industry. Like, it's not all just big wigs, right? And even in the big three, there's a lot of good people there that are pushing and working on stuff that they are going to make a difference. And granted, Tesla does the best with their marketing and with getting hype around their products, which is a good thing. I think other companies can learn a lot from Tesla on that, and but that doesn't mean that these other companies aren't doing things. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and especially here in Detroit, there's, as it stands, just in number of dollars spent per year, the Motor City still is number one for research and development of hybrid and electric vehicles, just in dollars spent. So, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're number one, but it's important what happens here, and to count out or to dismiss or just say that everybody inside the Motor City here is just in on this whole conspiracy and is against electric vehicles, and that, any independent repair shop, they just want to make money, right? Like the stereotypical mechanic just wants to, milk you for all the money that you have. I can see why Elon is distrustful of some of that, but because a lot of that's real. But then again, there's a lot of good people, and there's good companies like Voltec, and so yeah, that's what's frustrating to me, is to not be welcomed, but then not only that, and not to just be ignored, but to be actively pushed away. That's frustrating because, like I said, if I want to work on Jaguars, I can do that. I could pay the money to get subscriptions, to get the software. I can do that. Now, I can't do that for Tesla, at least not at this point. And I would like to see that change. It would be in their best interest to change that. Their customers would appreciate it, and we would appreciate it. And not just because of business, but because there's a lot that we can offer, and we have experience. It may seem like, building Toyota Priuses and working on Priuses for all these years is not that much compared to a Tesla, but actually, if you look at who has the most number of electric miles driven, it just like the most experience with electric powertrains, it's definitely Toyota. I mean, they've been number one in the hybrid game since the very beginning, and a lot of people criticize them for that, including myself at one point, until I started coming around to their why they are doing this. And a big part of it is, of course, hydrogen, which that I did not agree with before, and I can't say I still fully agree with it, although I've come around a bit to it, but that's a different whole other topic. I say I've come around because I do understand why they are going towards that. It is a longer term vision. If you really take a long term vision, I know a lot of people think that, including myself, that by 2050 the battery technologies that we'll have, like, I don't know, hybrid graphene ultracapacitors or something, some crazy stuff like that, that it'll just be no need for hydrogen. That may or may not be the case, it might not be. And there's a lot of challenges with hydrogen. So on that part with Toyota, yes, even I am still not fully understanding why they're sticking with that. But what I'm going to do, and I'm kind of new. I mean, I have another channel for Voltec hybrid and EV repair, just putting up videos for doing different repairs on Priuses and things. But I'm new to streaming on YouTube. I've streamed on Facebook Live, but that's not the same as this. And so I'm learning things about copyright policies and all that kind of fun stuff. And YouTube is very understanding. And so we'll see. I know I've watched other shows where they play other news clips, like other people talking about an issue, and then I'm going to talk about and respond to what they were talking about. So it's like, okay, I think, because if they're a news station and I'm a news program and I'm talking about what they're talking about, then I believe that follows the policy. So let's see. All right, I'm going to put this back to HDMI in. So you guys are seeing what's on my computer screen, which means I can do whatever I want now, run around. Now, really, I just want to drink some water. See, what I'm doing is, if I just practice going live on air every day, I'll get better eventually, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. Get better. All right. Oh, wait, can you still hear me? Yeah, you could still hear me. Good. I wanted you to hear me. I did not want you to hear me. All right. So I was going to. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. Oh no, these are. Oh, this is the Now You Know guys. I watch them. They talk about Tesla and sustainability. Oh, look at me go, pulling this stuff up really quickly. No, that's the stream. Anyways, there was another video that I'll find in a second. Yeah. Where I swear I put that thing. New to Mac too. I learned a lot just in the last few years. Oh, where did that one go? That's not it. Sorry, people. It's live. This is what you get. YouTube. Okay. Nope, that's not it. Let me just go back then, because these guys had. Oh, it's probably this one. Yeah, here it is. Gosh, it was right there. All right, so this is E for Electric. They are, a news program like what Eva is, and we're not to their level quite yet, as far as everything looking all nice and pretty, but we'll be there soon. Keep in mind, this is all just me at this point. So everything that's being done right now is being done by me. And this camera equipment I got, makes it possible. So, all right, let's go back. Or not back. We're going to go to the video. Oh, I'm trying to touch screen my laptop. So I got an iPad in front of me and then a laptop. And I was trying to touch the screen on the laptop. All right, so now you guys are seeing this. Let me see if I can listen while this plays. And we'll just listen, a few minutes of this.
and see what they got to say. And HDMI in should work. Okay, let's and this. All right.
When you sell 80% of the world's hybrids, you don't want to transition to fully electric. And I think that's what's going on here, that, they make so much money on their hybrids. They have such a competitive advantage selling hybrids that they know they won't have that competitive advantage with fully electric cars, because there's a lot more competition. There's companies out there that are doing it better than what they could do right now. So why rush to do it? Why not just keep selling hybrids?
I hear you. And actually, I didn't know that fact. That does make partial sense. But at the same time, why not have one, right? I mean, it won't hurt anything to have one to, if anything, to test out the market, to test out the technology, because I don't care how big of a manufacturer are, that even Volkswagen Group and other manufacturers have had trouble with their first electric car, because, even though they're big and been around for a while, it's their first go at it. So why not do that? Try to become profitable just on a smaller scale, and be able to do it. They certainly can hire talent, or already have talent. They have the money, they have the factories, they have this deal with Panasonic now. Why not do that? Like, I'm not saying they should go electric tomorrow. I get the whole hybrid sales thing, but why not at least start trying? Do they not believe the future is electric? And by electric, I mean battery powered, not hydrogen fuel cell powered electric.
I think that they know that, Alex, and I think it just comes down to the fact that Toyota does not want to make a car that loses money. It's very simple. Electric cars are not profitable today. It's that simple. And I think that they are much more content making hybrids that make them a ton of money, selling a ton of them, and saying, you know what? When we need to, we can flip the light switch and do it. We're Toyota. We're huge. And you know what? They have a tremendous amount of experience, more than any other automaker, working with electrification, let's say. It's not fully electric cars, but they've sold how many million hybrids? And it's giving them a lot of experience working with batteries, working with electric powertrains. It's not totally the same thing, but they've got the engineers, and I think that they can jump in the game when they need to. I'm not happy that they're not joining in now, and they're not, say, doing their.
Okay. Let's stop that there. And let me just say that Mr. Tom Maloney, he makes a great point there, and I really couldn't say it any better myself, because it's true. If you didn't know, electric vehicles are not profitable for automakers at this moment in time, because of the enormous research and development costs that are, it's more than a traditional ICE. If you were, for example, Volkswagen, and they recently announced some really big plans to go forward with, make sure my audio's on, go forward with electrification, right? And so has FCA. But so taking a company like that, that they're kind of new to building electric cars and hybrids. I mean, they had a few, but compared to what they were doing before. So if they said for the 2020, what companies? Well, I said FCA. And whatever other one before that, but if it was like Dodge, for the 2020 Dodge Charger, for example, I mean, how much more research and development do you think went into the 2020 Charger model than for the 2019 or the 2018 or the 2016 or whenever the previous generation was? Like, even the last generation change for the Charger, it was still basically the same car, right? Like, it's probably still using the same engine. It's probably still using the same transmission. Now they tweak things and make some improvements, but they've kept the vehicle largely the same. Now, compare how much money and resources it takes, and carbon, by the way, to do that research and development, because that's a part that gets left out in a lot of these projections that
that is worth taking account of, and that is, when you're talking about the lifetime carbon footprint for manufacturing a vehicle, it's also another part of it is the research and development of it. And you can break that down pretty far, all the way down to, how many engineers you had and, what they ate for lunch, how many of them are vegetarians, right? I mean, like, you can literally go that far with the carbon footprint. But when you're talking about research and development, you have to keep in mind that that's a very resource intense process. It involves building many prototypes, building it, destroying it, building it again, destroying it, and repeating that many times over. And so it's that uses a lot of resources just to get to the point of saying, okay, now we have a car designed, now we can manufacture it, right? And then it takes resources to manufacture it. So it's expensive to make these vehicles because, if they wanted to make a electric Dodge Charger, right, that is a huge change to the Dodge Charger platform, right? I mean, you're going from you're totally changing the power plant in that vehicle, and when you do that, there's so many other things that you have to change, and it really doesn't make sense, or it's difficult trying to make all this stuff fit now, into a gas car. You're better off just starting from scratch, basically, if you're designing a new vehicle, or if you're manufacturing a new vehicle. So that's a huge factor in it, that it just takes so much more money for whatever that particular model was, right? And then they're only going to sell that particular model for however many years, before the second generation one comes along, which has more research and development costs. Well, not nearly as much as the first gen, but I guess it could. It really depends, actually, now that I think about it. Second gen, you could use more resources. It's possible. So, yeah, just with that increased cost alone, that makes it not profitable for automakers. And then when you factor in, it's slim margins, because it's already the components themselves to make a battery electric vehicle, like just the battery cost alone is so high that, to get like a $30,000 electric vehicle, that is that's a tough challenge, right? It's not impossible. It's just not easy, and at least not right now. And so, and then when you also factor in that excessive depreciation that I mentioned, the automakers, they really are, losing out, because if you say, well, they lease a vehicle for 3 years and they could sell it for, whatever. But in this case, if we're saying that vehicle is depreciated so significantly that they get just, a small part of that back when they sell it after the lease, that's another reason that, so the margins are so slim that it's already out of most of the potential customer's price range. And so to keep it within that range, it requires, doing these other things to get that price down. And what it really means is that on a lot of these vehicles, they might be losing money for every car they sell. But probably a better way to put it is just getting back money for every car getting back money that they've already spent for every car they sell. And if all goes well, they can get back, all the money that they spent on it. Now, for a traditional automaker, that would be a total failure to just break even. That's not good at all. It's supposed to make a profit. It's supposed to pay itself back, and it's supposed to make a profit, right? So now you can argue if we should use that system and have a different system. But that's the system that we have. So, and again, in a capitalist system, well, if you're a for-profit business, you kind of have to be a for-profit business. That's a big reason why I started EVA. It's because I was running Voltec like a charity, and you just can't really do that. I mean, not completely like a charity, but doing things for cheaper than I should just because I care about these vehicles, I care about my customers, and once I really fully, I always knew it was good for the environment, and I always understood that keeping a vehicle on the road is better than building a new one. But it wasn't until I really just started crunching some numbers and saw, wow, if you do this on a mass scale, which you can, they're already all out there, right? We're not waiting on any deliveries for these. Like these are there. They're out there right now. So that time factor I was talking about, less than 10 years, well, then that becomes even more important because we could do what I'm talking about doing, which is just to rebuild and refurbish hybrid and electric vehicles, keep them on the road for longer. And instead of just selling them to people, because the leasing, it is a good thing. And individual vehicle ownership will be a thing of the past. And automakers are aware of this. And, in 15 years, new vehicles are probably not going to be sold. At least your typical consumer 10 to 15 years from now will, number one, they'll probably not own a vehicle because they will just do a ride share company or like Uber or something like that when they need to go somewhere if they can't get on public transportation or something. And number two, then there's all these other, not just like ride sharing, but to actually rent out your vehicle. There's an app called Hire Car that lets you rent your car, your personal car, to Uber and Lyft drivers or different, gig worker drivers. So, and that was kind of when I was first looking at things with EVA. Before EVA was even a nonprofit, but I was looking at all these things. I was talking with that company, and they were telling me, hey, you can get $30 a day renting out a Toyota Prius like this. And in LA and places like that, like on the weekend, you could get $35, $40, maybe even $45 a day. And so, what I realized was that what people need, it's not just access to cheap service and repairs, but which they do if they own the vehicle. But if what I really realized, they need access to a working vehicle. And so what that would mean is EVA has a fleet of hybrid and electric vehicles that we have saved from going to the scrapyard. And then the other ones that do go to the scrapyard, well, we intercept those and we take parts from them and we use that to keep the fleet of these other ones going, right? So the idea is that since it's a fleet, we will properly manage, do all the service and repairs, all the recommended service too. That's usually not done, like transmission fluid flush, right? We can do all that stuff, tuning up the engine so that you're actually getting 50 miles per gallon, right? In a Prius. That those are things that people usually can't afford, especially if it was at a dealership. And so what we say is, hey, all these people that right now, they just don't qualify to lease a new hybrid or a new electric vehicle. They don't have enough money to buy one. And, most of them would never even consider doing so because, they know that they can't afford it. And with the full coverage insurance part, that's a huge part of it, especially here in Michigan. And so where do those people go? They go to, a lot of them, they might, where do you go if you have bad credit, no credit? repossessions, we don't care how many you've had. Come on down to Twins Auto Sales, and we finance everybody. You're approved, right? They go to a financing dealership, and where they're not all bad, but a lot of them are. It's a systemic problem, really. It's not like it's just one or two, bad apples. No, there's a lot of these places are taking advantage of people with these really high rate, loans, like 20%, 25%, just, and that's where I read this the other day, and I was still surprised by it. I think it said 75% of Americans still rely on a vehicle to get to work. You think it would be less than that, but it's not. And so there's just a lot of people that it's not that they don't want to drive a hybrid or an electric vehicle, it's that they can't. There's not an affordable option for them to do so. Even if they had enough money to buy a used one, for example, if the service and repair costs, if it gets into a little accident or something, right? Let's say like on a Nissan Leaf, if all they know is to go to the dealership, that might be the end of it right there. It might have been in this little accident, and but the cost to repair it from the dealership was thousands of dollars, and they don't have that kind of money, and so they had to cut their loss and get what they could. And that's bad, because that's somebody trying to do the right thing. Hey, maybe I'll save a little bit of money, but I'm also do the right thing for the environment. I'm going to try out one of these hybrid or electric vehicles, and they dip their toes in the water to see how it feels, and a high repair bill shark comes up and just bites their foot right off. That's my analogy. And they're like, ow, I'm definitely not doing that again. I can't tell you how many customers I've had that was their last hybrid that they owned when they came to me. They said, I have to get out of this. This is not what I thought it was. I'm not saving money like I thought I would. And I can't do $2,000 repair bills. I can't do it. 50% of Americans can't afford a $500 emergency. So $2,000, it's just, it's not possible. But they can handle a known monthly payment. So if you said you pay $200 minimum a month, and then and that covers, I don't have all the specifics yet, but let's just say it's a minimum of $200, and that gets you, how many miles was that? I was assuming 2,000 miles, we'll say, or 1,000 miles. Okay, if it was 2,000 miles, then in a year that'd be 24,000 miles. That's okay. So that's reasonable. 2,000 miles in 1 month is that's definitely more than the average. So $200 and you get 2,000 miles or something thereabout. And every mile beyond that is 7 cents a mile or 8 cents a mile. It depends on the vehicle, right? The model. And so then it's $200. That's the minimum that I have to pay, and that'll cover me for 90% of my driving. If I go beyond that, I know what that amount would be. People can do that, right? They can do that. They can make those payments monthly, and then they know, though, they don't have to worry, if the battery goes bad, it's covered, right? It's just, we fix it, we swap in a new battery. If something, real major happens and we got to change the whole engine and transmission or something, something that can't be done in just a few hours, then that's when they just swap to a different vehicle. So like if they're in a Prius, a Gen 2 Prius, they just swap over to a different Gen 2 Prius, right? And we make this available as a subscription service. It's actually the better term for it, not leasing. A monthly service, monthly subscription to have a working hybrid or electric vehicle. Toyota Prius, Nissan Leaf, Chevy Volt, Chevy Bolt, the major ones, the GM 2-mode hybrids, perhaps a few Honda hybrids. We try to stick with what are the best, what are the most common and what are the best. And if you make those available, and then people that they don't have a down payment and they don't have good credit and they can't afford full coverage insurance, well, they can still apply and qualify to have a subscription to one of these vehicles. And if something happens, right, maybe they lose their job or something, right, and they just can't afford it anymore, they can get out of it at any time. And there's no penalties to doing so, right? It's a monthly subscription. So if you're done, you just don't pay for next month, and you give the car back, right, before the end of the month, in the same condition, meaning clean, or else there would be a cleaning fee. I mean, you guys have rented a hotel room before. You kind of know the deal, right? I mean, some basic stuff. So as long as you do that, you're good, and you can get out of it. And that giving people that peace of mind of, I don't have to worry about a high unexpected repair bill. I don't have to worry about being stuck in this lease for years. And what if they just don't like the car, right? I mean, how many more people do you think would try driving a hybrid or an electric if they had the option of $200 down, nothing out of pocket, right? Now, there is a deposit, actually, I should say that, or co-signers, there's terms and conditions do apply. We do have, there's more information on the website about that. We're still working out some of those numbers, but if you said to somebody, hey, would you ever consider driving a hybrid electric vehicle? I mean, you ask most people and they'll probably say no, depending on where you live. Where I live, it's going to be no. If you live in LA, it'll probably be yeah or no, because the traffic is ridiculous here. But but if you said, well, if you ask them why not, we'll say, well, I heard the batteries, right? The batteries in a hybrid, it's really expensive. An electric vehicle, they're not going to last forever. It costs $10,000 to fix a Prius battery. That's what I heard, right? No, it doesn't. But if you were using prices from the dealership for a new battery, maybe. But so that is the number one biggest reason, because I make it a point to go out of my way to talk to normal people about hybrid and electric vehicles, because being in this industry and in this community, we're in a bubble, right? We surround ourselves, we listen to the channels that we like that talk about electric vehicles and sustainability, and so it's almost like an echo chamber, right? Where we start hearing kind of what we want to hear, and we don't really hear the opposing voices as much. And I know you're saying, well, what do you mean opposing voices? Electric vehicles just make sense. They are the future, to which I would say, yes, they are, with an asterisk there. Terms and conditions apply. Because they do. There's a lot, like this is not written in stone yet how this is all going to unfold. Hydrogen might be the best solution. Maybe. At this point, I would not put my money on it. But, so, it's not written in stone. So, tying that all back into what I was saying about these guys, and I know I totally just skipped whatever point I was building up to there about these cars. Yes. About talking to people that don't agree with us and being in a bubble. Yeah, it's good to talk to people, and especially I'll talk to the dudes driving a big turbo diesel pickup truck, right? I'll pull right up in my Prius, right? This little blue one over here. It's got a big CB radio antenna on it. It doesn't in this picture. And it's got my signs on the side. It's got, danger, high voltage. It's been converted into a plug-in Prius, and it's loud and proud. I mean, it's like a hillbilly approved Prius work truck. I treat the thing like a truck. I mean, it spent almost the whole summer with a 150-pound ocean kayak strapped to the roof of it, because I realized I thought I needed bigger signs on the car, maybe to put a graphic wrap on it, right? So I could get people's attention better, so they could, look at the company name and see the phone number. But no, what I realized, man, you know what the best marketing was this 150-pound ocean kayak strapped to the roof of a Prius with an 11-foot long CB radio antenna and danger high voltage signs in the back hatch. I mean, that gets people's attention. And then after looking at all that, they can't help but notice and read the Voltec sign on the side of it. Hey, that's a little bit of free marketing advice, by the way. You want to know what my other best, most cost-effective, and by far advertising that I figured out for this was make business cards, right? Now, you guys know when you go to some show and they put the, you're at a baseball game or something, you come back and they put under your windshield wiper some flyer, and it's annoying, right? Because first of all, if it rains, right, and you got to pull it off of there, and a lot of times you just hop in your car, you start driving, and you don't even notice it until it's flopping in the wind, or you're trying to use your wiper and now you can't see. So I never wanted to do that because I knew how much people hate that, including myself. But I was like, man, I wish I could just, I needed to target my customers or find them, right? Because they don't even know that shops like me exist. They think the dealership is their only option. So what I figured out, though, was take my business card. I literally go drive around parking lots. The bigger the parking lot with more cars, the better. I mean, corporate business parks, and malls, shopping plazas, you name it, everywhere. Freaking GM headquarters, I don't care. I was driving through FCA's parking lot, putting my business cards for my hybrid repair business on every single hybrid that I saw. And I say putting on, so what I figured out, you put it right in the door here, right in the driver's door. You can just slide it like sticking out right there, right? So it's not stuck on your windshield. It's not gonna, if you don't notice it, actually what happens, and it's kind of beautiful. It's like it like forces them to read it if they care about the environment, because when you stick it in the door, if they don't see it and they open it, it falls on the ground. So, and if they see that, then they kind of have to pick it up. If you pick it up, you can't help but read it. And even that, I thought, man, well, what about when somebody sees me pulling up to their car and messing with it, even for that, brief 1 or 2 seconds until they realize, oh, he's just putting a flyer on it. Like, a lot can happen in that 1 or 2 seconds, right? Somebody thinks you're stealing their car. So, I didn't want to make anybody uncomfortable, but I said, I'm going to try it. See, if somebody complains, I'll explain to them, and then I won't do it anymore. But nobody ever complained. And I tell you what, that was the most that was the most direct way to get my message to my customers, because guess what? Every business card that I put out, it was on a hybrid or an electric vehicle. And even on Teslas, right? I even put them on Teslas because I said, you know what? They might have a Prius. They might have a Prius. Or if they don't, their friend might, or maybe their last car, which in a lot of cases was a Prius, and they gave it to their daughter or something, right? Maybe they still, there's a pretty high chance that if they have an electric vehicle, they might have a hybrid too. So, no stone left unturned, or whatever the saying is. I went after all of them. That was supposed to be a tangent cam. That's what this camera was supposed to be for, and I totally missed that opportunity. So, end of that tangent. That's free marketing advice by yours truly. So you're welcome. All right. So back to the bigger picture and trying to wrap things up, because this camera is going to die pretty soon, which is why that little battery icon came up there. And when it does, I'll probably switch back to the tangent cam. as that will be the only one that works. And so I've gone through a lot, and what I was last speaking about, though, was agreeing with Tom's point that electric vehicles are not profitable for automakers right now, generally. And so if we could do something to make it more profitable for them, perhaps they'd be more interested in doing it, right? So that is something that EVA can do. That's one of the net results of doing one of the many things. We have a whole list of different proposals and ideas and methods and ways to reuse components, repurpose things, clean up these processes, make it more efficient, get more people driving hybrid and electric vehicles. And that was the other point I was going to make, was that if you talk to these people and ask them, would you drive a hybrid electric vehicle? Most of them will say no. And you ask why, they'll say, well, because of the battery, and who's going to fix it? Like, I can't just go to my shop down the street that I've been going to my whole life. I can only go to the dealership, and we all know how bad that sucks. And so, no, I'm not going to do that. And so if you said, well, what if there was a place where you could just go, put down like a little deposit, like a $500 deposit or a credit card or something, cosigner, and you could just try one out and rent it, subscribe to it for a month at a time. And if you don't like it at any time, you can give it back and you can get your money or not pay for the next month, right? So people, I think, would be like, yeah, actually maybe I would try that, because there's then the two big things that they were saying, right? Why they wouldn't want to buy it. Now you've quelled those fears. They don't have to worry about, who's going to fix it. You're saying we take care of all of the service and repairs. So you don't have to worry about that part at all. Now, if you drive it off a cliff, that's not covered under the warranty, but under the service plan. So they would try it then, right? And here's the thing: you get somebody into one of these, I can almost guarantee you that they will want a pure electric vehicle. There's probably no better way to sell somebody on a pure electric vehicle than to put them into a full hybrid, strong hybrid, like a Toyota Prius. So they get the what's called the EV grin, right? The electric smile. They get a taste of it because you can drive in electric mode in those cars, and although the battery pack is only 1.2 kilowatt hours and really only about 800 watt hours of usable capacity, or what it uses in order to make the battery last a long time, yeah, that's people would try that. They get that feeling. They feel the electric. They feel how smooth it is. They see. Then it's proven to them all of these lies and mistruths that have been told to them for years about hybrid and electric vehicles. They say, huh, yeah, actually, well, this is a hybrid, so actually I don't have to worry about charging it at all. So I don't know why I didn't think of that before, that I could just get a regular hybrid. And with this company, I don't have to worry about replacing the battery or anything. That's all covered. I just pay the set amount per month, and I know exactly what I have to pay. You would get a lot of people that would not ever drive or even consider driving a hybrid or an electric. They would do that, especially once their friends or other people are doing it and they're talking about, oh, nice new watch, right? Or I like your new whatever, your new purse. The girls at work, well, I like your new purse. How'd you get that? Oh, I'm saving so much money now driving my 2005 Toyota Prius that, now I get to go out. I go to the movies on the weekend, I'm not sweating so much when rent's due. People will be like, Oh, really? Oh, you pay how much? Oh, where? How do I get that? No. Okay. You know, and then the next step from there is that person then, let's say they do start saving money, right? Let's say that they were that person I was talking about that was in this really high rate, financing a car from a financing dealership where they're, paying 25% interest, and, it's just, you miss a payment and you can lose the vehicle, you can lose all the money you put into it and still owe money on it. And so that person was paying all this money before for this piece of junk that was getting, 13 miles per gallon, let's say, right? I mean, just the catalytic converter's just shot. This thing is just leaking fumes. It's dirty. It's inefficient, right? It's not even just that it burns a lot of gas. The gas that it burns, it does a very bad job of doing it, and so there's extra NOx emissions and extra not hydrofluorocarbons, but just hydrocarbons, extra hydrocarbons in there, and so they're getting 13 miles per gallon in that thing, right? They're paying arm over leg for the thing. All service and repairs it's on them, right? And if they miss a payment, it's all down the toilet, right? That's a crappy place to be. And that's a lot of Americans right now, a lot. And it's wrong. But there's not a better option for them. So that's why I developed Eva. And when you put this all together, what you get is, okay, a car that was going to the junkyard saves, in a hybrid or electric car that was going to the junkyard, it's an organ donor and saves all these other ones from going to the junkyard. And then by doing all that, refurbishing parts, we're able to have these vehicles for so much cheaper than what it costs to make them new, that we make them available then for people to lease or to have a subscription to use them. Maybe they just need it for the weekends. You could do daily rentals with this. College students, for example, we plan on having a special program just for them where, they come into maybe the University of Michigan here, and they're here for whatever it is, 8 or 9 months out of the year, right? So a lot of them, they can't afford a vehicle. A lot of times they get on a moped, which is dangerous. As much as I love mopeds, I could show you my legs, shoulders. I can show you lots of body parts messed up for mopeds and motorcycles. But, so yeah, they hop on a moped, and that's dangerous. Drinking and driving a moped, whew, yeah, that's real bad. And even if you're not drinking and driving, well, you're driving around in a college town on a moped at 2 a.m., you might get hit by a drunk driver. And that's bad, obviously. So most parents would feel much better to have their beloved child in a rolling cage, essentially, right? So but they don't, if they're only going to be there for 9 months, what happens with the vehicle after then, right? They can't afford a lot. That's where we could have a special just for college students, where you come in to town, right, and you come by, you pick up a Prius, your parents co-sign for it and all that, so you're good. And the parents know that their child is in a safe vehicle, reliable vehicle. If anything happens with the vehicle, that it'll be taken care of. And as far as towing and all that too, we also take care of all of that. So, because I do mobile service, Voltec does mobile service, so that is not a foreign territory to me. That's something I excel at doing. And so, if you have a problem, just like a tow company that's 24/7 will have a 24/7 number. Actually, it gets even better than that. We basically have OnStar. We have our own OnStar system, but it doesn't do audio or video, so you can't call us through it. But if your car was if your engine was overheating, for example, or it was low on coolant, or your battery pack was about to fail, or we're seeing something, that data is being transmitted back to us. Again, no audio, no video, and no GPS location, just to be clear. And none of this data is sold or shared with any other company or organization. This is strictly for our diagnostic purposes, to be able to do over-the-air diagnostic services, and also asset protection, because as I'm mentioning, that there's a lot of great things with not having to have full collision insurance. The obvious question is, well, how do me protect my assets where people don't just destroy the vehicles, right? And if they don't have any money down, then they're really not going to care about it, right? Well, there's ways to deal with that. There's ways to reduce that. Now, and then there will be accidents, right? That's going to happen. But this is why a fleet is important. When you do this as a fleet, you are essentially, it's a risk pool, right? What is an insurance company? It's a risk pool, right? So the idea is that, hey, we all have this thing and it's worth a lot of money, and we want to protect it. So it's unlikely that some event will happen that will destroy it or take it away. It's pretty unlikely to happen to any one of us individuals, but as a group, you can be sure that it will happen, right? When you talk about a large enough group, yeah, for sure, there's going to be an accident. So if it's a small chance, so if all of us just chip in a little bit together, we'll build this pool of money. And then when one of us has an accident, that you get paid out. That's how it works, right? So that concept obviously works, or we wouldn't have insurance companies, right? We wouldn't have car rental companies. We wouldn't have car financing companies. We wouldn't have dealerships if none of this worked. So it works, but you might say, well, how is that any different then? Well, you're just talking about a used car dealership that's like it's like a used car dealership and a junkyard in one. Well, yeah, kind of, you could say that, but specifically for hybrid and electric vehicles only. And it's much more organized and directed, because currently in our system, it is not organized or directed. It's all done in a haphazard, after the fact kind of way, where it's just chaotic, right? And the net result of it is that a lot of these will go to the junkyard. And as I said, we need some to be organ donors, but it's bad when one that I could have fixed, right, that it was financially total. That's really the ones that I am most talking about. A vehicle that's financially totaled, that it's taken off the road because it cost more money to fix it than it was worth in dollars. And so that's bad as far as carbon reduction, because, well, maybe it costs more to fix it, but the carbon reduction is worth it. If you want to put a price on carbon, then you could justify that. But also, if I said, well, that price you said to fix it, it's just way too high, and we can do it for a fraction of that price. Well, that kind of changes things a little bit, right? Like all these different forecasts and trends that are based off of looking at the cost of ownership for a vehicle for the whole life of the vehicle, so how good of fuel mileage it does, and how much repairs are needed. So you look at all that, and I forgot what I was saying, because I started thinking about what's the next part I'm going to talk about. I got to finish talking about the part I'm talking about. Also, I need a co-host. Yeah, Fred, turn this on. That looks cool, right? It's blue. Sweet, man. All right. Oh, it's light also, so maybe you could tell I'm getting a bit slap happy at this point. Back to what they were saying here. Yeah, I'm going to switch back to the other one. which is about to die pretty soon. It's a good timer, actually. He said, yes, the Toyota's not going to make electric vehicles because they're just not profitable right now, which is true. And they make money selling hybrids. And the way the rest of this conversation goes in this interview is the other guy, forgetting his name, I could look real quick, but like, man, why aren't they building electric vehicles though, right? Like they've been so far ahead for so long in this, but now they're like, and they actually say in here, and it's funny, I'll like read some of the comments even on the bottom of this video. People are like, yeah, Toyota, they're gonna be the Kodak, right? They're gonna be Kodak soon. They're gonna be they're like, how could they go from being the leader to being at the very back of the pack? And you see, Toyota's position, well, may not be popular. If you look at the carbon reductions of them making millions of hybrid vehicles versus making a few 100,000 plug-in electric vehicles, the emission reductions from that is larger. So, are hybrids better than electric cars? Well, yes and no. It depends on the car. It depends on what year you're talking about. It depends on a lot of different factors. But what my general argument is, and I'll make a better case for this as I go along with these videos and present more data to back it up, is that no, I'm not against plug-in electric vehicles. I love them. As I said, I converted my Prius into a plug-in, and it's great. There's really nothing better as far as drive quality. That being said, is it the best use of our available resources to focus on making 300 plus mile BEVs and like SUVs? They're talking about 300 mile range SUV BEV. That's a very, very large battery pack. It might take 5 years of charging that thing on solar before it pays back its carbon debt of manufacturing. Now, as I said, we have less than 10 years. I'm going to keep circling back to that. So why do I keep saying that? Because you convert, okay, let's say somebody, their Toyota Prius, it's at 250,000 miles. It needs a new hybrid battery. It needs to be rebuilt. They have two options. They can, they can sell it, get what they can, and they're going to get the cheapest, whatever vehicle they can get that runs, right? Just a gas or a piece of junk, right? They're going from getting 50 miles per gallon to 20 miles per gallon maybe, and so that sucks. But so look at how much carbon, or let's say they're going to a car that, this is what I did the math for, that gets 25 miles per gallon, okay? That's fairly average. So driving a car that gets 25 miles per gallon for 1 year, 16,000 miles, will produce, and this is just for the fuel alone, this is not including oil changes or the manufacturing footprint emissions I was talking about. Just for that 1 year, for 16,000 miles at 25 miles per gallon, you will release 4 tons of CO2, 8,000 pounds. So now, if that same person, instead of going into that 25 mile per gallon car, if they could keep their Prius for another year, that's getting 50 miles per gallon, right? Double. That cuts in half the emissions. It's 2 tons instead of 4 tons. Well, I can one-up that even better to the blue Prius in the picture there that I converted to a plug-in hybrid that you could say, depending on how you want to do the numbers, but gets 100 miles per gallon because it can get infinity miles per gallon when it's in electric mode, which it can do when it really shines best under about 52 miles an hour. It could do electric above that, but it's just not, downhill. Going downhill, it can sustain 75 miles an hour on about a 5% downgrade with a tailwind. But and it has that kit when it was new. It's a high motion kit. It had like I think a 25 or 30 mile range, and even now, the way it is right now, I'm getting like 15 miles of charge. Don't underestimate what you can do with 15 miles of charge. If you opportunity charge everywhere you go. So when you go to work, well, you leave your house, it's fully charged in the morning. Okay, you get to work on electric, or mostly electric in the case of these. It's not always, it's like a Chevy Volt where it does its first 35 miles or first 15 miles in pure electric and then switches to gas. In some ways, it's actually smarter because you don't need as big of an electric motor. And then when you really need that additional power for acceleration, like when you step on the accelerator, it just works like a normal hybrid and kicks on the ice, right? So you don't actually need as big of an electric motor then. But if you said I got a 15 kilowatt battery pack, right? And I'm going to drive 100 miles. So if it was a Chevy Volt, and let's just say that was 15 kilowatt hours, and you did the first 35 miles in electric, and then the last 65 in hybrid mode. Okay. Versus if you put that same 15 kilowatt hour battery pack in my Prius, and you did that same 100-mile drive, and you released or injected into it, however you want to look at it, 15 kilowatts of electricity into your drive. Which one gets the better total mileage? Based off my numbers, the Prius does. And it's interesting because even if they were the same, if you keep in mind like what I said, that, well, you can make a smaller electric motor. But I'm going too much into the weeds here on this one, probably. I'm supposed to be trying to wrap this up, and I'm not even close. But what these guys were saying though is it's true. So if we can make them more profitable, then automakers would be more inclined to make it. And you may just say, well, I don't care about the automakers making profit. And why do you care? Do you work for them or something? No, I don't. They won't hire me, believe me. Well, probably at this point they probably would. But no, I don't work for them. I don't get any money from them. You could probably say Voltec is the enemy of most OEMs, but EVA is not an enemy of the OEMs or anybody for that matter. I'm trying to be on everybody's side. I created EVA to have a platform to connect people, to talk about this stuff that I thought is important. It is important and wasn't really being covered as well as some of these other channels, because, hey, this is a growing market, right? And these other channels are great. I'm not knocking them at all. All I'm saying is that this is, we do not have 100 different TV shows for electric vehicles yet. We do for gas vehicles, right? I mean, I could name off probably about 20 of them. And so there's still a need. And so what I was trying to do with EVA is show automakers a better way, giving some better options to bring their research and development costs down. And if you go on the website and read about it, but I'll be making better videos. This is me ranting and practicing being on live TV and getting comfortable with it and figuring out things like, remember to speak into the microphone. Last night I had it turned down too low. Normally people have a cameraman, but no, I don't need that. So, but with Voltec and EVA, that was, I don't work for auto companies, so why would I say why am I defending Toyota for not making electric cars? It's because what I'm talking about. Because if Toyota has done the numbers, and they have, and they've shown that they can have a larger reduction in global carbon emissions by making more hybrids instead of a smaller number of electric vehicles. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's go to tangent cam for this one. All right, tangent. Toyota Prius, like I keep talking about, and I'll talk about many, many times over, has a battery pack with a capacity of 1.2 kilowatt hours. Yes, you heard that correctly. And it uses about 800 watt hours. And it does that in order to maintain this battery for a long time. It's a power cell. The battery modules or cells, you can say that they're a power cell, not an energy cell, like lithium iron phosphate, for example, which lithium iron phosphate is very good at putting out a sustained amount of current for a long time. What it is not good at, though, is doing huge bursts of current in or out, right, very quickly. In other words, a lot of power in and out fast. So that's the difference between energy and power. And whereas nickel metal hydride, Prius, and most of these hybrid batteries, they are power cells, and so they can take 200 amps up to 200 amps. In and out, and in a small package. It weighs about 70 pounds, 80 pounds, 88 pounds maybe. So think about it this way, right? Let's say a 100 kilowatt Tesla. How many Prius battery packs could I make with one Tesla battery pack? 90? 82, 80, something like that, right? If you were just looking at kilowatt hours alone. Now, it does not work that way because of the amperage part that I'm talking about. It would not be able to accept that much amperage, breaking a Tesla battery into 80, 1/80ths. It wouldn't be able to handle it, but it does speak about an important thing, which is we have a certain amount of lithium per year that gets pulled from the mines, which means there's a certain number of batteries we can make per year until we keep improving the technology where it takes less lithium, right? Or you improve the capacity, so you need less total batteries. You need less total material for that same 15 kilowatt hour battery pack. So, but considering that and considering the time frames I'm talking about, it may make the most sense to, at least in the near term, really be focusing on hybridizing vehicles and really focusing specifically on the ones that use the most fuel, which is commercial vehicles. By a long shot, they use about 70% of fuel used for transportation. So you may ask, well, why is all this attention then on light-duty passenger vehicles if that's only 30%? Well, because we had to start somewhere, and they had to start small. So they had to figure out what works with these smaller vehicles, right? Before you move on to vehicles that might cost millions of dollars a piece. So there's that. But then I would also say, yeah, there should be more of a focus on commercial vehicles, and that is indeed part of what EVA will be trying to do is helping that development. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a plug-in electric vehicle. You should. It's great. I just think we need to have a more serious discussion about what all the options are, and you really, really, really need to look at the total carbon footprint of things, because I'm totally guilty of this too. Like, just back when I was first into electric vehicles, like, okay, you hear somebody say, yeah, but it took, how are you going to charge it? Well, you charge it with solar panels, right? Come on, dummy. I mean, that's easy. Well, it's not quite that simple. And now it is that simple, but then also you have to make the solar panels, right? You have to transmit the power. You have to store the so. But I tended to just, my reaction to those questions or criticisms before was to just brush it aside, like you're focusing on an unimportant detail that will work itself out as this technology matures, which it may or it may not. But it is an important point, and it's we need to discuss it, right, and make sure that, hey, this really is the best way to do things. Now, I think that in the long run, that battery electric vehicles will be the way to go, and that's another reason why I'm saying, just think about 10 years from now, we will have better battery technologies by then. So perhaps Toyota is waiting. Perhaps they've made the calculation that that their emissions reductions would be more significant if they just continued focusing on turning out many times more hybrids than electric vehicles. If you went back to my case of just by kilowatt hours, you could make like 80 Prius battery packs from one 100 kilowatt Tesla battery pack. Does not work that way practically. I'm just saying, if you think about it in those terms, right? Because it is a big difference. You can make a heck of a lot more hybrids than electric vehicles. And if you look at the emission reductions of having more people in those vehicles, it's more. I mean, you could reduce more carbon. If we said no electric vehicles at all, and just all vehicles will be hybrid, a lot of people would be like, well, no, I don't want that. Well, what if the hybrid got 250 miles per gallon? It is possible if you know how much energy there is in a gallon of gasoline. So 13, I think it's 13 kilowatt hours, right? 12 kilowatt hours, I believe. It's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of energy in petroleum, which is why it's stuck around. Does not mean it's irreplaceable, but you know, it's just basically, I am going to go for and support whatever method or way can show and actually prove, right, through the data. Not that, hey, this thing has the potential to one day reduce carbon, right? That no. It's doing it, and it's doing it now, and we can measure it. I will support whatever that is, whatever that may be, and that may come back to bite me in the butt if that happens to be hydrogen. So, because to me, saving the planet and saving the oceans, I mean, that's what's most important. And if we get to drive cool electric vehicles while doing so, then great. And if somebody said, you know, you'd be better off taking all those electric car batteries and using them to hybridize semi-trucks, and that would reduce twice as much carbon as making those into little sedans and stuff. I mean, what would you say to that? I would have to say, yeah. I would have to say, yeah, I'm going to go with whatever reduces it the most. Now, that is not the case. We will have plug-in electric vehicles, and we'll have plenty to choose from. But I don't think right now a 400-mile range electric SUV is a good use of resources. And people that maybe aren't fully thinking about it that way, tend to just criticize the automakers that they're not interested, they're not committed. You heard them say it there. They just don't believe that this is the way. You know, it could be that some of the things they're saying, some of the challenges, maybe some of it's true, and that maybe they're waiting a little bit longer for the technology to come along. Now, also, but yeah, it's important that we do things now. And so, but yeah, maybe they're not lying about all of it, right? Maybe it's not all a conspiracy. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely conspiracies. That's real. Do you know conspiracy theory was actually a term that was invented by the CIA? Now you know. All right. I was supposed to finish with some point, tie that back together. But I think at this point I'm talking in circles. Hey, you're seeing the battery symbol on this. I might as well just plug this thing in. Why not? You're already seeing it anyways. You might be asking why. Why do you have a camera? That you need to, that does that, right? I'm supposed to be pretty high tech. Well, that's a cheap camera, and I found that out the hard way. That there's the little things like that, right? Maybe well, no, I'm not going to say it. I said I wasn't going to say it, and I won't even let you know what I was talking about. See, there's secrets that things that we know about in the industry, and I'm not trying to like, ooh, look at us. I'm just saying, like, yeah, there's stuff that we hear about, and that it's things that companies wouldn't want people to hear. It's things that people could be fired for if they knew who leaked that information. And I'm not saying leaking like people trying. Just look, we're in this industry. Us people that work with this stuff daily and with our hands and many other ways, we're at the front lines of it, right? So we tend to swap stories and share what maybe a little bit what's going on with our company or whatever. So yeah, and sometimes we hear about some challenges or maybe certain issues, right, that you're not hearing about from these companies or from the news because they're not known yet. So, and I want to keep that trust bridge very much open, and because it is in the interest of my viewers and people that support EVA. Like I said, I'm trying to be a friend, not a foe to automakers, and I'm trying to work in combination and in between the automakers and suppliers and everybody in the product chain, so the junkyards, the dealerships, and governments. And I am doing that on behalf. Think of EVA as a lobbying group or a support group for electric vehicle owners, hybrid and electric vehicle owners, or people that just care about sustainability. And there is no lobbying group right now for independent repair shops that work on electric vehicles. I looked it up; it didn't exist, so I just created my own. But it's much more than that. It's about giving a voice to people and having a platform to talk about these issues and just ask questions. Is it really that late? Have I been talking for that long? Wow. It's 2 a.m. That can't be right. I've been talking for that long? Holy. Wow. Yeah, then it is time to end the video. I was going to say I was going to, how the heck is it 2 a.m.? That can't be right. I don't know. Hopefully that's wrong. Wow. All right. So, hey, I just want to thank the E4Electric guys for letting me talk about their video, even though I didn't ask them for permission. I hope they don't mind. Thank you. And hopefully I'll talk to them. Right now I'm just a itty bitty little channel. But that's going to change. You'll see. And yes, I put together this set myself, pulling things out of the trash from the side of the road, from the attic, literally. And so, we'll have a better set eventually. So you'll get to see the actual progress, right? It's kind of like a diary where you'll get to see these very beginning of me talking about till 2 a.m. like a madman about sustainability all by myself, and you'll get to see that change and see us go make it larger and larger, and that'll be fun. So I'm looking forward to that, and yeah, I hope maybe you learned something. Hopefully, if you listen to somebody for a few hours, you could learn something. Um, and that's not talking about you, that's talking about me. Yeah. So, with all that being said, there is something I have to do because I don't have a cameraman on the fly with me here, so I just have to do it myself. But shouldn't be too bad. Oh, and hopefully the volume this time, I think I already adjusted it. Yeah, I'll put it down a little bit just so it doesn't blow out your eardrums. Oh, and by playing 30 seconds of this instrumental song means that I will get no money from advertisers for this video. I don't really care. I'm not doing this to make money. I'm not doing this channel or Eva to make money. Will I make money from Voltec, my other company? Probably. Hopefully, because I've spent a lot of money and a lot of years of my life and a lot of stress, sweat, blood, and tears to get to this point. So, yeah. Yes, I hopefully can get something back from all this. But really, the main thing I want is recognition that this work is important and to make a difference, reduce carbon, and get people driving these cars and help people out. You know, that's what I like to do. And there's going to be a lot more stuff than just me talking for hours. So, you know, with all that being said, thank you. Aloha. And I will see you all soon.
Who's that? The mastermind. Who's that? The mastermind.
Just want to say one last thing. I'm aware that the date and all that was wrong on those graphics, but I still ran it anyways. Yeah, it'll be better in the future, you know, when I have people to help with this stuff. So, with all that being said, bye-bye!